my name is Staffan Larsson. I'm a professor of computational linguistics at Gothenburg University, and I also work at Talkamatic, where I'm responsible for the research side. And I'm doing this presentation together with José Cano and Amelie Åstbom from Talkamatic. First, I just want to say a little bit about Talkamatic. So we started in 2009, and we work on conversational AI and dialogue. And we have a lot of cooperation with GU, of course, through me, but also through students and so on, especially with the CLASP, the Center for Linguistic Theory and Studies in Probability, which specialize in computational linguistics, NLP, and dialogue as well. Talkamatic is owned by the founders, GU Ventures, Almi, and some investors. And until a few years ago, we were sort of like a research institute doing research projects. Now we do a lot of proof of concepts and innovation projects. And we are about to move into getting more operating on a licensing basis. That's the idea and hope soon. And in this, yes, right. So dialogue is just not all NLP is about dialogue. So I thought I'd say something about what comes into dialogue. Of course, in the dialogue you have participants, and for conversational AI, of course, one of them is usually a machine. The dialogue has a goal, so we're mostly interested in goal-oriented dialogue rather than social chat and things like that in Talkamatic. That goal is part of or operates in a domain, the thing you're talking about, the area in which you're operating, or the application, or what you want to call it. And of course, you use language to do this. That's what it's all about. So, and one part also the overlap between the domain and the language is the entities, the things you talk about and how you refer to them. So our role in this overall project is to explore how this language data that is collected and how these models can be used, with a focus on how you can use it in the context of a dialogue and dialogue system. And so we do some experiments and give feedback to the project partners how you could possibly improve the data to make it even more useful, maybe hopefully not only for dialogue, but maybe also for other purposes. So one example of this data and these models is, of course, as I mentioned, the name entities. And this is useful, of course, in a dialogue system for natural language understanding. So you have to figure out what the user is talking about. Otherwise, you're not going to have a very good dialogue. And the specific thing that José and Amelie are going to explain to you now is how we worked with named entity recognition, and specifically the categories of person versus first name and last name. And by that, I hand over to José and Amelie. I will keep doing the slides.
Yes, next slide, please.
Yes.
Right, so this is going to be a bit more of a concrete example of this, what Staffan just mentioned. So when it comes to working with dialogue systems in particular, we need to be prepared for, well, all manner of user behavior, because we can't predict what a user will say, right? But we still want the system to be able to handle whatever comes into it, or in some way at least. So in this example, which you could say it's like a digital receptionist service. Like imagine you're outside of a door to a company and you're announcing yourself and you need to see someone in particular. So in this case, the first one, we have the assumption that the name Krona in this case is just recognized as a person name, but no more granular than that. So in this case, the system might need to ask for more information in order to find the right person. And right now it doesn't know what information it has already received, just that it is a person name of some sort. So because of this, the way of finding out like what information is missing and what information it needs further to ideally find the right person in some kind of background system. There are a few examples here of how that could look. Some of them quite clearly less natural in a human conversation than others. So a human being in this case, a human receptionist would of course in most cases know whether a name it's received is a first name or a last name. We tend to figure this out, but the system can't really do the same thing without additional information or some kind of additional step here. And this could also be true for other domains, like say you have a booking system and you're collecting information to fill into certain slots in some kind of form in the background, something like that. Then you would also need to know, like, what is this information actually? Is it the last name if you have a first name and a last name box, for instance? So in the second example, we assume that we can figure out whether it's a first name or a last name, that the NLU model can actually have this kind of granularity and let us know which it is. And suddenly we can have a bit more of a natural dialogue where we can have the system ask, oh, so what's the first name of the person you're seeking in the event that there were two people with the same last name or something like that. So essentially, if the model can recognize this, we don't need any additional steps of finding out what information we've received. And we also don't need to, now I lost track, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, basically that's all. And I will hand over to Jose.
Yeah. So as Amelie has explained, and well, also Staffan started to explain, this, no, I return to the other
Okay,
slide.
sorry.
No problem. Yeah, we use the data of this project or extract to make this exploration on the usage of data to train an AR models that are used in a dialogue, real dialogue, practical scenario that could happen. Also introducing this more granularity as exploration of the necessities from the dialogue perspective. And for this, we made a sort of fast semi-automatic and re-annotation of an extract of the data. So it reflects these first names and last names, and tested it in these kind of scenarios and seeing how the dialogue is affected. Since you can recognize first names and last names, or the system can recognize first names and last names, it could deal to a more natural dialogue than the system just recognizing that, okay, it's a person name, but I don't know if it's the first name, if it's the last name. It cannot distinguish between the different more granular categories. So I just mentioning that the engine the algorithm we used to train this model was spacey. But yeah, now next slide.
Okay.
So more about moving forward, about what we are intending to do, or what we even have started to do. Continue with this exploration. We have started to experiment a sidetrack on entity roles, like having these different entities that are part of the same category, that are person names. For instance, in this case, jag heter Lisa Jonsson och jag ska träffa Samuel Krona. That you have two person names here, but one of them is a guest and the other one is the host. Then you have to, I mean, if you want to deal in dialogue with a more natural way, humans are able to distinguish between both of these roles inside the same utterance. So we have started to experiment with that. We will also like to make a kind of comparison study between different machine learning architectures with the data from this lab. I mean, we have experimented with spacey, with the diet, the rasa entities, but I mean, could also be good to experiment with BERT. We're also following the advances in the language models for Swedish authorities project. This could be a BERT that we are actually using sometimes as support also for our NLU and NAR tasks. And maybe this Ben's Broad Data Lab could follow a similar track when training models. I mean, that's kind of could be kind of a joint collaboration between the two projects. Yeah, and that's it.